Good day, everybody, and thank you for joining this. My name is Abdulrasheed Kotti, and I work as a cybersecurity and software professional. My focus is on helping organizations to understand and manage risks that are associated with digital systems. Today, I will be speaking on cybersecurity risk management in financial systems. Now, before we go deeper, it's important to understand why this topic really matters. Financial systems, such as banks and payment platforms, are amongst the most targeted systems in the world, and this is because they directly handle money, personal data, and critical business ops. And a successful cyber attack in this space does not just lead to financial loss. It can also lead to loss of customer trust, penalties, or fines by the bodies that govern them. So the goal of this is to help you understand what cybersecurity risk really means, how these risks affect financial systems, as well as how organizations can manage and reduce them effectively. Let's take a quick look at what we will cover in this session. First, we will look at the fundamentals of cyber risk, where I'll explain the basic concepts in simple terms. Next, we will examine the financial threats landscape, meaning the common types of attacks that financial institutions see. After that, we will go through the risk assessment process, which is how organizations identify and prioritize risk. Then we will discuss the risk mitigation strategies, focusing on how to reduce or prevent these risks. We would also look at governance and compliance frameworks, which provide structured ways to manage security. Finally, we will review real world case studies and scenarios to connect everything to practical life. And by the end of this, you should have a clear and structured understanding of cybersecurity risk management. Now, let's begin with a practical example in order to make this more relatable. Imagine a junior staff in a bank, yeah, and one day they receive an email that appears to come from the IT department. The email says, please update your password immediately to avoid account suspension. Yes, and the email has a link, and the employee clicks on that link. This link leads to a fake page that looks very similar to how their real system is. And without him knowing that this is fake, the employee enters their username and password. At this point, the attacker now has valid login credentials, which is what was the point of it all. Next, the attacker would try to log into the real system using those credentials. And because there was no extra layer of security, such as MFA, they are able to gain access easily. Now, once the attacker is inside, the attacker can um, initiate a high value transaction. Let's take an instance of 10 million USD or Naira, and this person transfers that funds to an external account. Now, notice something that is key. There was no system hack in the real sense of it. The attacker simply used human error and weak controls. And this goes to now show that security is not only about the tech, it is also about people and processes. Now let's break down the main reasons why things like this are part of our day to day. Now the first thing is the human error plays a major role. Many users are clearly not trained to identify phishing mails, and even if they are, most of them out of rush, uh, or out of the fact that they did not think that they would get such mails. They are prone to trust or give or try to just do what needs to be done. And next, we have identity-based attacks. Instead of attacking the system straight, uh, the attackers would try to get user identities such as usernames and passwords. Third is social engineering. Now, they will try to tweak people to making mistakes because it is easier to break a person than the systems that have been put in place to prevent them. Now, how do we reduce this type of risks? The first is MFA. Now, this adds an extra layer of security beyond passwords. Even if a password is stolen, the attacker cannot log in without the second factor. Then we have user training and AI monitoring. Advanced systems can detect unusual patterns such as unexpected large transactions. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, let's define cyber security risk in an easy way, in an easy and structured way. A security risk is made up of three things. Yeah. The first is threat. Now, threat refers to any person or entity that wants to cause harm. For example, it can be an external or internal staff. Yeah. So it can be a hacker or one of your staff. Next is vul vulnerability. Now, this is a weakness in the system, and it could mean things like your passwords that are weak, the lack of security controls, or poor system configuration. And last is the impact. Now, this is the consequence for if the attack happens to be successful. For instance, it can cause loss in terms of finances, it can cause loss in terms of a data breach and some type of or any other type of damage. So we now try to combine this into a simple thing. Risk is equals to threat times vulnerability times impact. Now let's make this practical. So if you have a weak password and a motivated threat. It can be an external actor now. The result of this is high risk of unauthorized access, which is the impact. So let's move on to the next slide. So now let's look at the type of threats that are commonly seen in financial systems. The first is phishing. Yes, and these are the most common, and they involve trying to trick the users into giving out some sort of sensitive information. And the second one we have is ransomware. And here, our attackers would encrypt the systems and demand that they get paid before they restore the access to those systems. Then third is API abuse and supply chain a- attacks. So modern financial systems rely heavily on APIs. If not secured, an attacker can exploit them to access any form of data or perform transactions. Then for supply chain, these occur when attackers would target third-party software used by the organization in question. So to manage these risks, so let's talk about the risk assessment process. First is we need to identify our assets. And this means that we know exactly what we need to protect, such as systems or data or infrastructure. Next is to identify threats. And these now show who might attack the systems and how they want to do it. Next is to look for the weaknesses that could be exploited. Then the fourth is assess the likelihood and the impact. Now, how likely would the how likely is it that you would be attacked in that way? And next is how severe would the impact be? Then the last is for you to prioritize risk. You need to focus on the most critical risk first. And this would ensure that all your resources are used efficiently in order to protect the most important assets. So next is so after you are done with identifying risk, the next is to reduce them. This is done using a layered approach known as defense in depth. And there are three main types of controls here. The first we have is technical controls. And these are system-based protections. First is we can have things like the MFA or a 2FA. Next is en encryption. Yes. And the third is network segmentation. So this is a case where you you put what you need in a network that is different from the rest of them, so that in case if one in case if an attacker was to gain access to your network, he's not going to have access to the whole thing, just a little part of it. The next is administrative controls. Now, this includes things like policies and processes or procedures, as we might like to call it, security policies, training, and an incident response plan. The next that we have is DevSecOps. Now, what this does is it integrates security into development, and it involves things like code scanning and security configurations. This goal here is to ensure that even if one fails, others will still provide some sort of protection. So now let's look at a real world example. In 2016, attackers got their way to a Bangladesh bank using the SWIFT system. They were able to send payment instructions and successfully stole about $81 million. You can see that that's such a huge sum. And in all of that, the bank was only able to get back 10 million USD. So which means that the bad guys got away with $71 million. Now let's take a look at what caused this. The first is compromised credentials, like we had said prior to now. The attacker used the a phishing mail to steal the credentials of a staff, and this was used to bypass security and get access to the SWIFT system. Next was a lack of monitoring. Now, there was clearly no real-time system that would have shown them that an unusual transaction has occurred or is about to, because in such a case this was supposed to have been blocked because it's not the behavior of the user to do such things. And next is the fact that there was weak internal controls. And this shows that because in cases like that, there is meant to be a multi-layered workflow for transactions that have such a high value to go through different steps, different processes. Now, the fact is, strong technology alone is not enough. Processes and controls must also be equally strong. Now, let's look at the next slide. And this talks about key assets in financial systems. The first, and of which they always try to get, is customer data, because as we all know, banks have the largest data pool of people. Yeah. And after that, we have transaction systems, and these are, you know, core platforms that process high volume payments. Then we also have the payment platforms such as the mobile apps, card and things like that. Then we have the core banking systems too. And this is where all of banking takes place. It's like a ledger, plus minus, send to this person, get from this person, take a loan. You get things like that are the key assets that we have in the financial systems. Now, if we're to move on to the next slide, let's talk about the two main ways that we can assess risk. First is qualitative, next is quantitative. And I would try to use that in such a way that we can all understand. So for qualitative, these are things where you would see like high, medium, or low. And this makes use of an an expert that knows how the impact might be in order to give it such a rating. Then we also have the quantitative type, and this is where you would use numerical values to estimate financial loss. And most of the time, what banks do is they combine both in order to make better choices. Now, let's talk about the common vulnerabilities that we have in finance as a whole. And the first is weak authentication. Now, there is usually a widespread use of weak or reused passwords and a lack of MFA across accounts that have access to do big things on the platforms, like the $10 million transfer now. Accounts like that needs to have a very strong layer of security. Next is unpacked systems. Now, this is in such a way that we fail to fix the issues that have been found in our systems, even when there is a patch for it. And what's and why we have this is mostly because of the fear of downtime. So if there is one thing that banks fear is is their customers not being able to access them because it can cause widespread panic. So when they need to do some sort of patch that might take the system offline, they are usually very reluctant in such a case. And things like that would eventually build up and lead to losses. Next we have is insecure A- APIs. Now this is one major thing here because and if an attacker was to have access to one of them, there is going to be excessive data exposure in such APIs. Next that we have is poor access controls. And access, like we had said before, a user should have a password that is very strong and it should contain letters, numbers, symbols, all uppercase and lowercase, and it must have a very long password length so that this is going to make it very, very hard for the attacker to guess. The next we have is cloud misconfigurations. Now, most of the time, it is easy to hack people that are on the cloud or banks or any form of organization. And this is made majorly because of the fact that their access in terms of cloud is usually weak. They they do not treat it the way it ought to be treated. So this leads to gaps that can be hacked. So next we have is governance and compliance. Now, from what we know, most banks or institutions follow a lot of frameworks that help them to be more secure. And some of them here are the ISO 27001, which provides a structured way to manage information security. Next, we have the CSF, which is the NIST Cyber Security Framework. Now, this is a risk-based framework that is based off that is based off five core fun, fun, functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And I think in the latest one that we have, they have added a sixth one, which is also govern. Then we also have things like the DORA, which is majorly for institutions that are based in EU. So next, let's talk about monitoring and incident response. Now, what's even with strong con controls, incidents can still happen, and that is why monitoring is essential. Systems like SIM collect and analyze logs in order to detect unusual behavior. And when an incident or occurs, organization needs to follow these steps, which is de- detect, contain, and recover. Then we also need to have things like an AI driven response. And in this sense, it means that we need to make use of AI for real time anal analytics in order to know what might be true or what might have been false based on how a user would behave normally. So let's talk about the final slide, which is our key takeaways. First is risk is or being able to manage your risk is a continuous pros- process. It's not a one-off thing. It is a cycle that must keep on going. Next is human centric security. So what this means is tech is not only part of the solution. It is just a part of it, while humans have the most part, because 88% of data breaches stem from human error error. So we need to ensure that we have a culture of training, of ongoing training over and over again. And the final one is defense in depth. And what this means is we should have multiple layers of security at all times in order to be sure that if one of it fails, one would catch it and fraud would be lesser. So thank you so much and do have a wonderful time. Thank you. Bye everybody.